this video, we're going to be learning about what ASMR is. So, ASMR is an acronym for Autonomous Sensory Meridian Response. And so, ASMR happens to be a perceptual phenomenon that is characterized by a pleasant tingling sensation that often starts in the scalp and spreads down the neck and the spine. And it is accompanied by relaxation and reduced arousal. It is typically elicited by a specific audio-visual triggers, and they include soft, repetitive, or socially intimate cues like whispering, tapping, slow hand movements, or personal attention scenarios. Let's talk about phenomenology of ASMR. So, core features of ASMR include tingling, static-like paresthesia that is localized to the scalp, the neck, or the upper back. There's the affective component that involves calmness, comfort, and sometimes euphoria. And then there's also attentional narrowing and absorption. For common triggers, auditory ones include whispering, crisp sounds like paper or tapping, slow speech or accent, or prosody. Visual triggers include careful hand movements, close-up detail work, and then of course there's social or role play features like eye contact, simulated caregiving like mock exams or haircuts, role play. And for prevalence, it is not really universal yet. So self-reported responders vary across studies. And then for individual differences, there's greater trait absorption, openness to experience, and sensitivity to subtle sensory cues. So these have been reported among responders to various ASMR triggers. Now for measurement and experimental paradigms, we have the self-report scales that measure frequency or intensity ratings, trigger checklists, and even ASMR experience questionnaires. There's no single gold standard scales or guidelines for measuring ASMR response. They're just various lab-developed tools. For physiology, they can trigger mixed autonomic pattern, so it can lead to decreased heart rate through the parasympathetic mechanism. It can also lead to increased skin conductance through the phasic arousal mechanism. And pupillometry sometimes may show dilation during the peak tingles. And then neuroimaging also reveals some findings. So the functional MRI studies have implicated the default mode network alterations, which leads to the greater functional connectivity that's atypical for rest versus the task. There's also the salience and the attention network that could be involved, such as the anterior insula of the brain. There's also the sensory motor regions that have shown some activity during the tingles. This could be part of the secondary somatosensory cortex system. And then there's some evidence of cross-network coupling that suggests atypical integration of sensory, affective, and self-referential processing. And then on the electroencephalogram, there's limited data, but there has been reports of increased alpha and theta waves in some contexts. This could be consistent with relaxed attentional states. We also have some mechanistic hypotheses, so affective touch and caregiving circuitry could be involved. This could overlap with the systems that are engaged by gentle affiliative touch, even when stimuli are vicarious. And there's predictive processing, which involves slow, predictable stimuli that reduce uncertainty. So precision weighting may favor internally generated pleasant sensations. There's also the may be useful for sleep and anxiety management. So users commonly report improved sleep latency and reduced state anxiety. And small experimental studies support short-term reductions in heart rate and subjective stress. For depression, some users report mood improvement, but controlled evidence remains limited at this time. For pain, there's anecdotal reports of analgesic effects, but there's minimal controlled data. And for risks and considerations, it is generally low risk, but there's potential for maladaptive reliance. So, for example, there could be insomnia that is conditioned on chronic ASMR use, or even irritation in non-responders. And it's important to screen for misophonia if certain sounds provoke